And we're going to spend just some time today talking through knowing what's allowable with our federal funds. Of course, there's going to be a heavy concentration on things Title I, but we are certainly going to kind of touch base in just the broadest sense of knowing allowable use of funds. And I will tell you that I did plan on sharing with you a document that is just the allowable use of funds document that has been revised this year for our office. What I will do for those of you who are joining me today, as well as all participants, I will email this document out to you. So please don't worry that if you don't see it popping up in the chat box, you will still get an opportunity to have that document for your review at a later time this afternoon. Okay, so let's talk about how do you know what to pay for with your federal funds. It's kind of a complex scenario because there's a lot of things that you need to look at with paying for different items or providing certain activities for your grants. And I will first of all direct you to look at what's written in law and what regulations do we have that are guiding us. Of course, the Department of Education puts out program guidance from time to time. If you were listening in to our general sessions yesterday as well as today, you heard reference to 2 CFR Part 200. That covers just your basic allowability that you would find under the Uniform Grant Guidance. And then, of course, you may see reference, especially if you look at your GAN, 34 CFR Part 76. And this covers general allowability information from the U.S. Department of Education. And on occasion, the U.S. Department of Ed will issue policy letters. I will say that we have seen lots of policy letters issued from the Bush administration or the Obama administration, not as many under the Trump administration, and is yet to be seen what will occur under President Biden. But those U.S. policy letters also guide us in what we determine we can do with federal funds. You will hear this often. With determining allowability, we always say that the cost must be necessary, reasonable, and allocable. Of course, we also talk about complying to cost principles of the federal award and being consistent with policies and procedures. Also, that you're being consistent with the way that you treat your direct and indirect cost rates. And this morning, Melissa Myers gave a great overview of direct and indirect cost rates. So if you weren't able to listen to that general session this morning, when you have the opportunity, please go back and listen to it in the recording. And of course, we cannot use federal funds to meet cost sharing or matching requirements. And your spending should be adequately documented, as well as the reason for your spending should be adequately documented. A new item that was added is that it must be incurred during the approved budget period. So if you're spending funds in one of your grants, make sure that you already have approval for that particular item. Don't spend ahead and say, I'll ask later. Make sure that you have your approval for that particular project or item that you're trying to spend funds for. Let's get into necessary and reasonable. A lot of times when the Consolidated Finance and Applications team returns a grant to you, returns an application to you, it usually pauses with necessary and reasonable. Usually the things are allocable, but the necessary and reasonable clause will catch you. And so if you have an Edgar book, I would urge you to go back and review 200.404 to talk about necessary. And with that, what we're looking for is, is a cost generally recognized as an ordinary and necessary purpose for the operation of the grant. So you're asking, is it included in the plan? Is it aligned with your program goals? Does your school have the capacity to use what you're purchasing? And I like to think about capacity in this sense of maybe a school wants to buy all iPads. And, iPads are certainly one of the major technology devices that are used today. But the district isn't an iPad district. So I would ask, do you have the capacity for that purchasing lots of iPad devices if there's no one in the district that can assist you if something should go wrong, if there's some issues with viruses or just the hardware itself, or being able to run the software for the device. So those are some things to keep in mind about the capacity. And then we talk about reasonableness. Is the cost recognized as ordinary and necessary here? And we're talking about, did you follow your procurement processes, and did you adhere to the laws, and did you pay the fair market price for what you're purchasing? Did you act with prudence? Did you act the same way you would if this were your personal checkbook? Would you automatically go out there and purchase something without doing due diligence to make sure that you have the fair price for what it is you're trying to purchase? So here's some more questions to really think through. Do you really need what you're trying to purchase? Was the expense necessary to meet the programmatic or the administrative costs? Do you have that capacity to use what's being purchased? Are you able to defend the purchase? As you know, lots of times, especially when we're talking about money, it can get you in the news really quickly. So are you able to defend that purchase? Make sure that you're not overbuying. I've read before where a district has gotten into trouble because it purchased, for example, a room full of technology, but the technology is still sitting in the boxes that they were delivered in, and they're still sitting there a year later. So are you able to defend a purchase like that? Or why did you buy it if it's just going to sit and gather dust? So really think through all of those things. And of course, documentation is key to everything that we do. You need to make sure that you are adequately documenting the amount of funds that you spent on an item, how those funds are used, the total costs. You're keeping all of these records for your audit. I think Greg King talked a bit about this as well, and certainly Tiffany Winters talked about this. Winters Kessler talked about this in her presentation on Monday, that you want to make sure you have all the receipts, if you will, because I assure you, when the monitoring team comes out, they're going to look to make sure that you are keeping record of everything that you've purchased. The monitoring team will pull random samples and ask more questions about what you've purchased. Some other questions that you need to think through. How does the expenditure directly support student achievement? How does it support meaningful professional development? Does it increase your participation of parents in activities or assist the parents in helping them support students' achievement? And of course, we're looking at whether or not the purchase will foster continuous improvement, and that you're evaluating what you purchase from year to year to make sure that you're doing the right thing and not over purchasing by continuously buying items that aren't needed. With all of those questions, I'm sure what you want to know is just basically, Jewel, tell me, what can I spend my money on? Quite honestly, there is not a huge list that I can share that say these are all of the definites and these are all of the no's, and do not deviate from that list. And the reason why I say that, because there are a lot of factors that go into determining allowability. Of course, there are the yeses and nos that are clearly articulated in your GAN. Your GAN will spell out where you need to go and reference what can be purchased with the Uniform Grant Guidance. You'll see all of those regs spelled out in your GAN, and of course in the law, but there is some wiggle room available to you. And then there's sometimes more restrictions placed upon you depending on the district you're in, because your district also can set certain policies in place that are more restrictive and will not allow you to purchase something that maybe another district could purchase. But for the most part, let's talk about the generally allowable items that can be purchased. In Title I, you see things such as, of course, salaries and benefits, professional development to attend conferences or perhaps bring a speaker in, supply and materials. You can have supplies and materials for your instruction. So you may need to purchase supplemental books, or you may need to buy some manipulatives for something. And I know I said math and reading here on this page, but in thinking about Title I, you're not limited to just reading and math with Title I. You can purchase items for other subject areas. Of course, you have family engagement activities and extended day programs and field trips. Now, I will state, as far as field trips are concerned, you want to make sure that you have a clear programmatic purchase, and it's an allowable purchase under the grant. Now, our office will review what field trips are listed in your applications. Of course, we make sure that it ties back to something that is programmatic in nature. I often give the example of field trips such as Carowinds, and that we would deny that particular field trip because Carowinds is seen more so as entertainment And of course, entertainment costs are not an allowable cost in your federal grants. I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about advertising and public relations costs. Once upon a time, we were approving applications where we allowed districts to purchase things such as T-shirts or little tote bags and different things of that nature. But as we have gone through some training, we've also realized that those are items that are not allowable unless it is for something such as recruitment or program outreach. So in the past, for example, we said, oh, the kindergarten class is going on a field trip, and we want all of the kindergartners to have on our Stanley Elementary t-shirts in, fluorescent yellow, so we'll know these are our students and we're buying these t-shirts. It's a safety measure as well as anything else, right? We can appreciate what you're trying to do with purchasing those t-shirts for that purpose. But if you look at it, other than that particular day that they're wearing that t-shirt for that field trip, those are t-shirts that are more public relations or advertising than anything else. So we are curbing those approvals. We suggest that either you charge the families for those shirts, or perhaps find another revenue stream other than your federal dollars. Let your federal dollars pick up something else that can be paid. So if you wanted to buy those t-shirts out of general fund, and then Title I picks up something else, some other supplies and materials, you're offsetting that cost that way. But that's one thing that I will tell you that's caused quite a bit of confusion in the last 2 years after we've kind of determined what that really meant as far as using federal funds for advertising or public relations. Of course, travel is another thing that we talk about. Travel costs can be charged to a federal grant. It's spelled out in your GAN that we follow the state travel policy. Our state travel policy is actually a little more restrictive than what the federal policy is. And when you're looking at the difference between state or federal, we've got to follow the more restrictive policy. That's always the case with any federal grants that we're working with. We'll always adhere to the more restrictive policy. And of course, travel charges must be consistent with the entity's written travel reimbursement policies. Now, I can't get too deep in the weeds on what your district's travel reimbursements are. So what I would suggest that you do is really work closely and develop those written policies. Certainly there might be someone who can assist you with those travel policies within the agency, and I can certainly help you in finding out who that person will be. Let's see, I have a couple of questions. The first one says, so is there ever an instance when t-shirts could be paid out of Title I? Well, Pam, we did, like I said, once upon a time, we did pay for t-shirts. I'm trying to really think of a good reason for us to pay for a t-shirt. And I'm not really coming up with a good one right off the top of my head. Um, okay, so the question is, as a uniform shirt. Well, we have purchased uniforms for our homeless students before, but to say that we've gone so far as to purchase uniforms for an entire school, we've not done that before. So in small batches, yes, we've done that. But right now, I'm going to say no. I can't think of any reason why we would just go and purchase a large amount of t-shirts. I know as a former principal, of course, this was quite a few years ago before we had this advertising public relations piece come up. I purchased t-shirts for a select group of students if they met certain goals, reading goals or math goals or something of that nature. You and I both know that kids will work really hard for recognition, but unfortunately we have to find another revenue stream if we were to do something like that. The other question I see is, won't S&S apply to moving a general fund costs to a federal fund to allow using general funds to purchase t-shirts? And the answer for that, Cindy, is it depends. If you are looking at purchasing something at a school level and you've already satisfied your supplement not supplant clause, you will be okay. However, if you're trying to purchase this at the district level, the answer is you can't do it without jumping through quite a few hoops. And more than likely, the answer will be no at the district level because the district level still adheres to the old supplement, not supplant tests. So what you would want to do in this case of the t-shirts, let's say the schools were all given $10,000 in instructional funds or what have you, and every single school, Title I or non-Title I, received their fair share of that funding. They all have the same amount. A Title I school may choose not to use their supply account to purchase paper or supplemental books. They may use their Title I account for that. And then they would choose to use their general fund money to purchase other things. That's the only section we get into where it would work with your supplement, not supplant. Okay, let's move on. Some non-allowable costs. Of course, I kind of touched on this a little earlier. Unless it's written into the plan, you're not going to have much luck with anything, but entertainment costs are certainly not allowable without getting written approval from the federal awarding agency. That's not the state, that's coming directly from the U.S. Department of Ed. So I doubt that you're going to get an approval for an entertainment cost coming from the feds. Holiday parties, some field trips, and of course that's the amusement parks and fairs. Kindergarten loves to go to the state fair, to the petting zoo and things of that nature. That's going to be a no. And of course, alcohol is a definite no. Where we see this usually peak is when we're talking about reimbursements for a conference attendance. You may have a teacher or other district employee go out to dinner. They might want a glass of wine with their dinner, and they've included the cost of that glass of wine on their reimbursement receipt. Don't do it. I would suggest that if they're purchasing alcohol, that they ask that that be on a separate receipt. You certainly don't want to get into the trouble of having, Greg King or Rhonda Ray, who's on a monitoring team, pull that one receipt. Of course, as luck would have it, that would be the receipt that they would pull, and they would see alcohol on there, and it will trigger a deeper dive audit, and we don't want that to happen. So if you're one of the people who are reviewing these receipts as they come in, make sure that you look very closely, scrutinize all of those receipts, make sure you don't see alcohol pop up. Of course, we also see gift certificates and gift cards as non-allowable. And part of the rationale with that is that we can't always guarantee that gift cards or gift receipts will be used in the manner of which you thought they would be used when you purchased them. I know we talk about, oh, well, let's just give them a gas card, or let's give, a certificate to go to the grocery store. You can't guarantee that those gift cards will be used in that particular manner. So we avoid that. Here you see that I'm talking about documentation again. This is a new requirement. It's found at 2 CFR 200.334. You're talking about how long you need to keep your documentation. Of course, it says that you should retain your records for a period of 3 years from the date of submission of the final expenditure report. And Brustein and Manasevitz warns you that although you read this as 3 years, interpret it as 5, because with GEPA, it talks about 5 years. So keep your records intact for at least 5 years to make sure you're in the clear of anything that can happen. And do know that you can keep these records electronically, as well as having just files upon files somewhere. As long as it's accessible and legible, I think you will be fine here. So the question is, what's the bottom line regarding required procedures? You have the authority to develop some of your own procedures with how you're managing your grant, but they cannot negate what's already written in law, the Uniform Grant Guidance, or EDGAR, or your state or local laws and regulations. So make sure that you're keeping all of that in line. And let's see whether I can switch and share something else with you for just a moment before I show you the rest of the presentation. Okay, so this is one of the documents that I plan on sharing with you all. I hope you can see my screen. Hold up. This is the allowable use of funds guidance. And what you will see is just some background information about allowable use of funds. But as I get deeper into this document, you will see that we are breaking down what are some allowable costs based on the particular grant you're working with. And it's just going in in order of the grants. So we'll start off with Title I, and it's broken down into some categories so you can see what could possibly be purchased or not purchased. And then, of course, we move deeper into the other titles that you may be responsible for. N&D, Title II, and so on. So this is a document that I referenced that I want to make sure that you will all get a copy of, because each particular grant has their own set of rules about what is allowable and not allowable. And I'll make sure that you have that. Let me get back to the slides. Okay. All right, are you able to see my slide deck now? Back on that. So let's talk about some of the best ways that you can move forward with keeping up with these regulations and mandates that may come your way. So you've heard me talk about making sure that you're knowledgeable of ESSA by reading the law and the guidance. It's great reading. I encourage you to read, a chapter a night. It's just riveting information. And then, of course, I would, if I were you, subscribe to the U.S. Department of Ed's news feeds. Subscribe to maybe the Title I Monitor or to LRP publications. That's also something that would be available to you. There are conferences such as, such as the National ESEA Conference, NAFIPA, state-led conferences. Of course, the ESSA Academy is an example that we're in now. The SCADA conference that occurs every October is another great example. And then our office puts on other meetings throughout the year that I suggest that you attend. And of course, always know what your state and local regulations are, because they can, in fact, impact your program. So one of the things I would caution you about is that it may be tricky to know what's an allowable cost, so you've got to do some homework. Sometimes you might talk to a colleague in another district and they give you one answer, and then you talk to a colleague in another district, they give you something else as the answer, because some of what they're talking about is based on some district decisions. So you may not get the same answer more than once. So I'm going to encourage you to reach out to your program coordinator. Certainly reach out to us. We can help you navigate to find the right answer. You may get a no for one grant, but a yes for another. And what I mean by that is you may say, well, you want to use your Title II funds to pay for a particular item for your students. Well, Title II dollars should never go directly to students. So in that case, you might be directed to use your Title I or your Title IV dollars, or you may be directed to use Title V. So there are various options out there, and sometimes we will help you try to determine which funding stream would be the best for what you're trying to do. But of course, we know that you're going to have to defend your answer no matter what you're looking at using for your federal funds and the activity that you're doing. Like I said before, there's not a all-inclusive list, but the document that I will be sending to you this afternoon will give you a good start. And of course, as always, I can't say enough, check your district policies to make sure that you're not overstepping anything that your district would have you do. I want to spend a little time now talking about class size reduction. I will say this is one of the activities in Title I plans and Title II plans that get a little confusing, because Title I and Title II look at class size reduction differently. When you're talking about Title II is the easiest one. Let's look at that one first. It says, although you have class sizes that have been upheld, here's the recommendations that we need to look at. You're looking at K3, 30 to 1, 4, 5, 6, 30 to 1, if it's ELA and math, and grades 4, 5, and 6, 35 to 1, and 7 through 12th grades, you're looking at a 35 to 1 student-teacher ratio. As long as your class sizes meet these guidelines with Title II funds, you're able to hire an additional teacher. You cannot use your Title II funds to get to this ratio. You've already got to be at the ratio listed for the grades that you're considering hiring a teacher before you hire an additional one. Title I is the tricky section. So with Title I, you have 2 requirements that you're meeting. With Title I, you're going to have to meet the regulation that was on the previous slide. That much is a given, but what's the tricky part is your district supplement, not supplant methodology. And let's look at that, because that's the other piece that you're meeting. Here's an example for you. If we look here, you'll see on the slide, I know it may be a little small for you, so I'll read what I'm trying to get the point across for. For Oconee, they have a 1 to 18.5 ratio for their elementary schools, and the same thing for the middle, but the high school is a 1 to 21 ratio. So let's think about this for a moment. With their Title I plan, they want to hire an additional teacher for class size reduction in grade 5. And right now they're at a 25 to 1 student ratio, and they're trying to get to a 16 to 1 ratio. So if they're trying to get down to a 25 to 1 ratio here, have they met both requirements set in place for them for Title I? You've got to meet the state required ratios, and then you've got to meet the supplement, not supplant methodology. Should we allow Oconee to hire this additional teacher with the information that's provided to you on the screen? I'll give you a moment to think about that. So I'm going to say this. First of all, if we're thinking about the state's recommended class sizes, you know, let's go back to that page. The recommended class size for 5th grade was 30 to 1 or 35 to 1. We see here that they're sitting at 25 to 1. As far as the state reg, they're well below the recommendation, right? Because they're sitting at 25 to 1. But if we're looking at what they have listed in their supplement not supplant methodology, there's a problem. They're trying to get below what they said that they were going to do without the assistance of those federal dollars. So with this example that I've provided, the answer would be no, that we would not approve this particular position because they have not gotten down to the 18.5 class size that they said that they would prior to adding federal funds. So the other question that we get is, if we're missing our own supplement, not supplant methodology, can we change it? Yes, you can change your supplement, not supplant methodology, but what you need to keep in mind is that you are ensuring, regardless of whether or not you change the numbers in any way, you're still ensuring that all of this is occurring in the absence of federal dollars. So make sure that your supplement, not supplant methodology does that, no federal funds are taken into consideration with whatever you determine as your staffing formula or as your per pupil expenditure formula as far as supplies and materials are concerned. I will tell you that if you're also looking to find some updates or information regarding ESSA, make sure that you go and sign up for the updates on the ed.gov website. And it's easily found on that home screen for ESSA. So make sure that if you have not signed up, I urge you to do so. And of course, there's always good reading out there. I encourage you to purchase a copy of Edgar if you do not have a copy. I actually have several different iterations of Edgar. Each year, I will tell you that although some of the regs may change, some of the information towards the back of the Edgar book still remains in effect. So I keep each copy and I refer to it just in case. And of course, you will be told if something does change that's in that book. But I keep each copy. Have the orange copy is the one that I've given quite a bit of training on. And then, of course, there's a new version out right now. The latest Edgar book is purple. So if you don't have that one, you might want to grab a copy. You can go to the Boosting and Manasevitz website to find out how to order that book. And those books are usually about $35 or so. The U.S. ES Law and Guidance, please periodically go out to the ed.gov site to get that information. And then there's some different training that you can do at your desk. There are always some webinars available for you. The Department of Ed offers online courses for grant fundamentals. And then, of course, the CFO's Council also provides some training. Of course, if we have some questions, I'll entertain them. We have a few minutes left. And so, Tracy, you have a question just to be sure. Charter schools must follow the numbers in their charter school, in their charter for their class size reduction. Tracy, I believe you're correct. Of course, I would reach out to Donna Manning in the Office of School Transformation. She also handles charters. And I normally refer to her as it relates to anything to do with charter schools and numbers, because I have to make sure we are following your charter as well. You wanted me to, okay. Beth asked that I repeat the verbiage for not taking federal funds into consideration for class size reduction. Okay, that was back looking at your class size reduction page. Information here when I talked about your supplement, not supplant methodology. So Beth, the first thing we need to do is make sure that the numbers that you're providing for your supplement, not supplant methodology um, are in line, and that you didn't use federal dollars to get you to this particular class size. Is that what you're referring to? Because your supplement, not supplant methodology should not include any of your federal dollars to get you to that particular class size. In the absence of federal dollars, what would your class sizes be? So hopefully that answered your question, Beth. If not, certainly call me and we can talk about it in greater detail if you need me to. Are there any other questions for me? I'm going to hang around for a few more moments in case you do have questions that might appear in the chat box. But if you do not have any questions for me, certainly you may get a few of your minutes back to the day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.